It is so wonderful to be here with you. What a great crowd. Look who came out for you, Jeanette. Look at you, girl. So I'll tell you, there are a lot of things that I get asked to do, but when Tina asked me to do this, I leaped. I jumped. I said, absolutely. Her unforgettable memoir, The Glass Castle, took the literary world by storm. Readers were so enraptured, it remains on the bestsellers list, many of them 8 years after it first debuted. And then she followed up with Half-Broke Horses, the story of one of Jeanette's grandmothers, and it was a story intricately woven. It was a part memoir and part fiction. And now Jeanette brings us The Silver Star and a girl named Jean Bean Holiday. On that note, Miss Jeanette Walls. Jeanette, what a pleasure to have you here. I have to say, I love the book.
Thank you.
It kept me up.
Oh,
and,
good.
and that says something. Want to start with that transition from memoir, fact, to fiction. And was it a difficult transition to make?
You know, I've been going around for the last several years saying I'm incapable of making things up, so I got some serious backpedaling to do. I still sort of think of myself as a reporter to this day, and The Glass Castle, of course, was nonfiction, and I thought that was the only thing I had to say. There's some serial memoirists out there, and I'm not among them. I tell my story, and I go back to writing snarky paragraphs about celebrities. But this funny thing happened. These celebrities started pulling me aside on the red carpet and saying, "Thank you for writing about alcoholism in such an intelligent way. My father's an alcoholic, and I've bought several copies of your book and given it to my friends so they could understand my relationship with my father." And I thought, dang, can't write anything mean about that person anymore. And it's sort of being
louder.
I'm sorry. How's that? Is that better?
No. Can we maybe pump
The volume? Okay, how's that? Okay.
better?
So these celebrities started asking me, they humanized themselves, and I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore, but I didn't have an alternate career, but I'd been touring on behalf of the Glass Castle, and so people were asking me about my mother and her childhood. And so I thought I'd give that a shot, and so I interviewed Mom about her mother, and she was the one who encouraged me that it should be about her mother, not about her. And I didn't know how much of it was true because it's all from my mom, so who knows? And I found that I had to fill in the gaps, and so it started out being nonfiction, but I thought I've taken too many liberties. I've got to call it fiction. And then I thought that was that. And again, it was readers who kept asking me, "Are your parents mentally ill?" And I don't know the answer to that. There's certainly the far side of loopy. I don't know it, but I did a lot of reading on mental illness and the relationship between mental illness and creativity, and I became fascinated by it, and I sort of wanted to tell a story about it, but I couldn't figure out a way to do it in nonfiction. So I wrote fiction, but that being said, I really didn't make that much up. I still don't think of myself as a creative person. I'm more of an observer. And the sort of fiction that I'm drawn to is a lot closer to truth than non-truth. You look at a lot of the greats, John Steinbeck and John Updike, and people write what you know. So I cobbled together stuff that I knew and tried to make it believable and credible and feel real. The challenge becomes not what really happened, but what would happen, and what is believable. What would this person do in this circumstance? But since you're taking a piece from here and a piece from there, it's a little bit like a Frankenstein monster, and you got to make sure that the arms aren't too long for the body. And so that's the challenge, is to make the pieces all fit.
Let's set the scene. It's 1970. Yes. It's early in the Nixon presidency, so the Vietnam War is raging. You've got two sisters, Liz and Jean, whose name is Bean, that's her nickname, and their mother, Charlotte, who has aspirations of being a singer. and takes off now and again for weeks at a time, abandons the girls, and they take care of themselves. Here's what was fascinating. You don't have any children.
I don't.
You don't?
No.
I have an 8-year-old girl, almost 9, and it was incredible how you wrote in Jean's voice, this 12-year-old girl, because I was reading and I thought, my kid would say that. How does she do that? You don't have kids of your own, yet her voice was bang on as she tells the story of what happens to her and what happens to her mother and their journey from California to Virginia.
Well, thank you. It's mostly a case of arrested development up there. Sometimes I think a little bit like a 12-year-old. But that was a challenge. If you write something, you can't sound like a 53-year-old woman. You know, I have to say, what would a 12-year-old think? What would you do? And when you read it back to yourself and go over it again and again, and you have to make sure that whatever happened could have happened in 1970, that it's not too contemporary. So when you're writing nonfiction, you don't have to worry about these things. It happened. When you're writing fiction, the great challenge is, could it happen? Would it have happened? Have I transported the readers so that they're not thinking, oh, the author did this, so that you feel that you're in the story? I read the book back to myself a couple of times after I wrote it to make sure that it felt conversational. I didn't want them to think about the writing. I don't want people, I want them to I want anybody who's reading it to sort of feel that it's spontaneous.
The New York Times said that the glass castle haunts this book, but in a good way. And I understand what the writer means, because there are similarities there. You have got 2 girls who are left to fend for themselves, strong girls, independent girls, but they've got insecurities as well. There's a lot of you, there are a lot of your siblings, and there's a lot of your mom.
Oh, yeah.
in Charlotte, the mom in this book.
Yeah, in fact, one of my favorite lines in the book that I gave to Charlotte, it was straight from my mom. My mother lives with me in Virginia now. Not with me, I'm not a saint. We have a place out back for her. But, you write what you know. You write what you know. I'm not going to be writing thrillers. I'm not going to be writing about the upper crust of society. You write what you know, and these are some things that have haunted me. One of the things that fascinates me is the way that when parents are absent, the siblings look after each other. And I think that consequently, sometimes in dysfunctional families, the oldest sibling gets sort of gets it toughest, because they're in there protecting the younger ones and sort of breaking the waves. And I think that sometimes they come out the most damaged so that the younger ones can survive.
They've sacrificed the most.
Sacrificed a lot. And I think some of that happened to my family.
Tell me about doing the research for this book, because these girls travel from small town California to this little town in Virginia, and it's a mill town. And the mill has seen better days. And it's about old family money. And old families and kind of a dynasty that had its day, but it is no longer what it was. Tell me about the research that went into all of that.
Well, I live in Virginia now, in rural Virginia, and there are a lot of these characters there. There used to be a mill community, and I have a dear friend whose father used to own a mill town, so I've heard some of these things, and they fascinate me. And these people pining away for the glory that used to be, and especially in certain parts of the South in the U.S., you get, back before the war, back before the Civil War, And I have friends, they're very dear people, but they'll sit around rationalizing why their family owns slaves. I'll say, we treated them very well. And, oh, you did, huh? That's real nice of you. And it's a little mind-boggling. So I took a lot of that and gave it to Uncle Tinsley, how these charming, lovely people will sort of contort themselves. I live not too far from Monticello, and here's the man who declared all men are created equal, and I own a bunch of them, and it's just the weird contradictions that exist in these communities, and so I was trying to capture something, and I do love where I live, and I love the people around there, and one of the things that takes place in the Silver Star is the integration of the school. And when I moved to West Virginia, they just recently integrated, and it fascinated me, just the pain the anger on both sides. And I befriended an African-American woman who told me, I don't want to go to no cracker school. And I was like,
And that line's in the book.
I thought that was the whole idea. We're letting you come to our school. And it was sort of bewildering to me, like, you don't want to? And she said, why would we want to go to your school? We got a great school. It's our school. We can be, I was a cheerleader. My sister was in line to become a homecoming queen. We'll never be the homecoming queen of your school. And it was fascinating to me. So I put all that in because I think most white folk don't know that. And I researched that because I was, what if my friend is unique like that? Maybe that wasn't universal at the time. And there were a couple of papers written about that. And I found it genuinely fascinating. And I think that, I researched this because I think it would be incredible hubris to assume that I know or knew what teenage black kids thought about going to the white school. I have no idea. So I'm a big fan of research, of getting the facts. I can't assume. So talk to people who do know, and I find it fascinating. I read books for several reasons. One is for the emotional connection, but the other is to learn things that I didn't know. And if I could understand that about a community. By the way, not only this woman, but some of the research that I had indicated that the thing that really brought the schools together ultimately was sports.
Yeah.
It was
Football.
sports. In the case of the school that I went to, there was this really tall African-American, Maurice the Tree Robinson, and all of a sudden all these crackers wanted to hang out with Maurice, and it was this incredible unifying thing that, these people who had wanted nothing to do with one another, all of a sudden were on the same team, literally.
It was all about winning, right?
Yeah,
And that's all that mattered.
Exactly.
That's all that mattered. Tell me a little bit about Charlotte. I want to get into this character a little bit. And just for everybody, I'm not sure who's read the book and who hasn't, but Charlotte is the mother in this case. And she is such an interesting character because she's a negligent mom, yes, but brilliant. And there's a line that she blurts out, and I've got it here. And I just want to go over it with you, Jeanette, and talk about where it came from. Because Charlotte has left her girls for weeks, and she shows up when Liz, her girl, has an issue. And I don't want to give it away for those of you who haven't read the book, but something happens to Liz. And so she comes back to be the caretaker that she isn't usually. She's never there. And she says, at one point, she says, don't be afraid of the dark places. If you can shine a light on them, you'll find treasure there.
I love it that you love that line. I think
love that line.
I think it's my favorite line in the
I
book.
love that line.
And it was something my mother said to me one time. And as wacky and as infuriating as my mother can be, every now and then she comes out with these incredible gems. And I thought that was one of them. I'm going to steal that. Because, and I'm glad you picked up on that this woman who, in certain ways, drops the ball big time.
So badly, she drops the ball. Badly.
But she gives what she can. She does, from time to time, come out with wonderful things like that, that if you can take them, they're jewels, and don't expect Charlotte to be a normal mom, because she's never going to be.
No. But that's a line that'll stop you in your tracks, because that's a line to live by, isn't it?
That's when I sign books, that's the line I put in.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I know you didn't. That's why I'm so impressed you picked up on it. That is my favorite, I think, line from the entire book. Just shine your light on the dark.
Yeah, I love that line. And there's another, okay? There's another Charlotte line. Listen to this. Don't be someone else's cheerleader. Be the star of your own show, even if there's no audience. Love that. I love that. And Jeanette was talking about the cheerleading theme in this book, because as this school is getting integrated, a lot of it is about the cheerleading squad. Who can try out? Can the African American girls try out? What's going to happen to them? The white cheerleaders have their boyfriends on this team, and they're afraid that African American boys are going to take their boyfriend's spot, so they're boycotting the cheerleaders. There's all this stuff going on. And then she comes out with this line, which I love. Another line to live by.
Well, bless your heart for seeing that. But, again, this whole anger and mishigas going on about the cheerleaders. This is something I witnessed, and white girls were quitting the squad. And it was bewildering to me. I'd grown up sort of in the Southwest, and I'd never witnessed anything like this. What is all this anger about? And there are these deep wounds, and all these people wishing it was the way it used to be. But back when it was used to be, that wasn't any good either, and just this longing for the past. And back when we had power. And this community is losing power in so many ways, you know? These people who, they're clinging to anything that they can to feel superior to other people. And, you know, some people think that the way to feel good about yourself is to feel superior to other people. And I think I kind of used to think that too. And writing my first book, which is such a revelation, because that doesn't make you feel good about it. You feel isolated when you try to feel superior to other people. It's making those connections and understanding that you have so much more in common than you have different. And that's the way. And only once you sort of let down those barriers that you erect to think you're protecting yourself and distance yourself from people who are unlike you. You let those barriers down, that's when the magic starts happening.
That's when the magic starts happening, and also the importance of family.
Yes.
Because there's all this turmoil
Yes.
going on, but there's always family. And in this book, Bean finds out who her father is. Hence the name of the book, The Silver Star. He won a Silver Star in the Korean War. And she finds out, and she finds her father's family, and we discover all these things through her eyes. But that connection, that family connection, is an overarching theme between the sisters, between, you know, the mother and the two girls, the uncle and the girls. They've got family, if not anything else at all.
And that is, as you said, a central theme, because it's just so important as a source of strength for Bean, who had been traveling all around and didn't know anyone or anything. And to some degree, it echoes my experience. I mean, it's not verbatim, but yeah, I found great strength and great love in finally finding certain things out, that you belong somewhere in the world.
I found it astounding, and I'm just going to share with you because Jeanette and I were able to have a bit of a conversation before we came out here to be with you. And Jeanette said to me, I didn't think anybody would care about what I had to say. As a writer, I didn't think anybody would care and didn't think anybody would embrace what I had to say. And that took me aback.
I was so prepared to be met with contempt and ridicule that I thought I would get fired from my job, as I mentioned earlier. I think I saw the world as a place filled with potential enemies. After having written this book, I see the world as a place filled with potential friends. It's been a complete life changer for me, and I can meet a complete stranger. We cut right through the small talk and share intimate things. And I'm not bragging about myself. What I'm bragging about is the power of storytelling. And it's something I've only recently come to truly understand. And because I've told my story, it gives people the courage to tell me theirs. And sometimes people come up to me, complete strangers. And this woman told me one time about that her mother had locked her in the basement. And she found a way to sneak out and go to the local library where she studied nursing. And a librarian helped her get into nursing school. And this woman told me this as a professor of nursing. And she said, after having read your book and heard you speak, I think I have courage to tell my own children about my past. She said, they're always asking me, and I changed the topic. I said, I think you'll be surprised by how receptive they are. How old are they? She said, 31 and 33.
Wow.
So this woman was hiding this story. And I wanted to shake her by the shoulders and say, what are you talking about? Why would you be ashamed? That's such a great story. It's a story of heroism and triumph. But I remember, oh yeah, I was ashamed too. And shame is a funny emotion. Somebody once said to me, secrets are a little bit like vampires. They suck the life out of you, but they can exist only in the darkness. Once they're exposed to light, there's a moment of horror, but then, poof, they lose their power.
Isn't that the truth?
I found it to be so true. And now that I've told my story, it doesn't haunt me at all. It's just something that happened to me. In fact, going back to what Charlotte said, if you can shine your light in those dark areas, that's where you find your greatest source of strength. I think everything in life is both a blessing and a curse. And it's entirely up to you what you choose to focus on. And these things that we dislike about ourselves, if you're able to just flip it over, there's the blessing.
But it takes courage.
Oh, it takes a lot of
It takes tremendous courage to do that.
That's a scary looking thing, and you have to confront it. You have to confront it.
Did you get to a point where it wasn't even a choice?
Yes,
You
very well said.
Right? It wasn't even a choice at one point.
I got to
I'm sure.
do it. I just can't do
Doesn't
this
matter
anymore.
whether the job's on the line, whatever's, I have to get it out.
Absolutely. That's very well said, yes. And part of it was seeing my mom on the streets, but it took 6 weeks to write the first version of this book, of The Glass Castle, and I spent 5 years rewriting it.
5 years rewriting.
Trying to be honest. And by that, I don't mean I was lying, but what really happened.
Had you buried some things?
Oh, deep, deep, deep. Not just buried, but when I wrote them, my agent read it and she said, you wrote this as though it happened to somebody else. And I realized how I used journalism to distance myself. And humor, some things I wrote as funny that weren't funny. Some things were pretty funny that I wrote them as funny. But yeah, 5 years to be honest. And in that, sort of find the voice and how I really felt about these things.
That's incredible. It must have been almost a relief to get to the fiction and be able, or was it?
No.
No,
No.
No, there are other issues now.
There are other issues.
Yeah.
There are other issues.
What are the issues?
It's, believe it or not, it's the same thing. It's still trying to be honest.
Really?
To be true. What is true? If I read a book and it doesn't sound real to me, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's a waste of my time. I want to learn something about people. I want to make that emotional connection. If somebody didn't get deep enough and give me something that makes me understand human nature better or feel that I've made a friend, then I don't know why I just read that book. So the challenge becomes making these people real and bringing up issues that make people think. The number of people who've told me, that reading, and again, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm bragging, but that reading The Glass Castle helped them with themselves, helped them deal with their own issues is staggering to me. So it's really not about the writer, it's more about the reader and the effect you have on them. And if I can do that with fiction, I'm a happy camper. And the fact that you quoted a couple of lines that meant a lot to me. That's why we tell our stories. It's as nice as the bestseller list is and all of that. That's not what it's about. It's about emotion and being real. And if you can do that through fiction, that's great. If you can do it through nonfiction, that's great too.
Coming from the life that you did, did you often look at other people and think, look at that perfect family over there?
Oh, all the time.
There couldn't possibly be anyone else like us.
All
Although
the
there are
time.
people coming up to you all the time now saying we were just like you and maybe worse, right?
All the time. And that's the great gift that readers have given me in exchange for coming clean. But all the time, all these people with their perfect lives. But it's funny because another reason that The Glass Castle took so long is I was trying to write a little bit about my first husband's world that was filled with fabulously wealthy people who managed to be so miserable. And I was trying to write about them, and she was very, very thin, and I was very, very thin at the time, and she was saying, do you not eat because of mother issues? I thought, well, that's a funny way to put it. And but yeah, I suppose so. And then I found out that she didn't eat on purpose. Why would you not eat on purpose? And she said, well, my therapist helped me understand that is because I'm angry with my mother. And that didn't make any sense to me at all. Like, if you're angry with your mom, wouldn't you eat her food? I don't understand that at all. And I'd never met somebody anorexic before. Yeah. And for somebody who had to dig food out of the garbage, not eating on purpose, like, that's fascinating. So I tried to write about it, but it sounded like I was making fun of her. And there's nothing funny about anorexia. We poor folk have not cornered the market on suffering, so let the anorexics write about their world and let me write about my world and help people not of my world understand it. And I'll read her book and understand her because that's what it's about. But yeah, I did think that everybody sort of had perfect worlds. I was at a signing one time, a girl a couple of years ahead of me who had been a cheerleader, perfect little figure and flouncing around in her little maroon and white cheerleading outfit. She came to my reading and asked me to sign a copy of The Glass Castle. I thought, this is Alice of the Looking Glass here, because the most popular girl in the school is asking the least popular girl in the school for an autograph. And she handed me the book and she said, this book really resonated with me. My father was an alcoholic, and I ended up marrying an alcoholic. And I've really struggled with sorting all those issues out, and you've helped me. I thought, wow, don't assume.
Never assume.
Don't assume you know anything about the shallow gossip columnist, about the crazy homeless woman, or about the popular cheerleader. You know, we all have our stories. And the great blessing is that I've been given now is that people come up and tell me their stories. And it's been a life changer for me. And one of the many things I've learned is trust people. First, you have to trust yourself. Before you can trust other people, you have to have that belief in yourself. And then you can start to open up to other people. Because if you walk around life like this, nobody's hurt me. I used to, you know, one of the blessings of my childhood is I'm a fighter and a scrapper. And one of the curses of my childhood is that I'm a fighter and a scrapper. And somebody looked at me cross-eyed, I kicked their butt, okay? and it's quite a revelation that you don't always have to fight. In fact, life is really sweet if you're able to accept the goodness and the kindness, and you don't knock somebody cross-eyed every time that they look at you the wrong way. And it is, you know, and I still have issues. I will always have issues, honey. I got issues, you know. The first time my husband tried to eat off my plate, he almost lost his hand. I will always have food issues, but we all have issues.
We do.
We all have it. And I think that one of the tricks is not pretending that you don't or avoiding them, but to understand and even embrace them and put them to work for you.
As you said, Jeanette, we all have stories. It's just
We all have
about
stories.
it's being brave enough to be truthful about what those stories are.
That's exactly it.
Bring them to light and be truthful
And
about
once
them.
you're truthful, the truth will set you free. It will. The truth is complicated and can't be condensed into a snarky little paragraph like I was trying to do. Sometimes what is accurate is not what's true. And that's why it takes so long to get at the truth. And that's what you've got to try to do in fiction as well. And you can't rely on what happened.
Did your mom read The Silver Star?
She did.
What did she think of it? And did she see Charlotte as herself? Did she see
did
yourself in
not
Charlotte?
recognize-
She didn't recognize Charlotte, did she?
But she thought Charlotte was a lovely woman who just did what she could to feel better about herself, and she hoped people were nice to her. So that was her take on Charlotte. But it was her favorite of the 3 books I've written. She was actually fine about The Glass Castle. She was upset
That was my
about
next question.
She was upset about my description of her driving. Other than that,
That's what she. That's what she was upset about?
she said, you know, I don't see everything the way you see it, but I understand why you see it the way you see it, and you had to write the truth as you saw it. And I got to say, with everything I said about her, that's pretty impressive, that she could say that. She didn't read Half-Broke Horses. I said, Mom, it's your story. She goes, I know, that's why I don't want to read it, I know it. And I said, well, what if you don't like the way I wrote something about it? She goes, that's your business. And I said, but you could get it changed. She said, well, we might have a fight over it. Who cares? Who cares what you wrote? And, you know, the thing, Mom has no proprietary sense over me. And that's both good and bad. And she doesn't try to make me anything I'm not. And I've come to believe that's an amazing, wonderful thing. It has its downsides, but it also has its real upsides. I've never depended on her excessively. I learned independence very early, didn't get homesick when I went away to college, all sorts of advantages, you know, so there are great gifts to a childhood like mine. I really do believe that.
Do people judge you, Jeanette, because your mom lives with you now? Do they wonder what the heck you're doing?
Some do. Some cannot understand
Knowing your story?
why I would let this woman, why I would take care of her when she never took care of me.
And why do you?
Well, because I love her, and because I'm able. I'm so fortunate that I'm in a position that I can do this. He gives me great lines. She's a source of great joy for me, a great joy. The other day, these stupid carpenter bees were flying around our head, and she saw me eyeballing them. I was thinking, I got to get some poison and kill these stupid carpenter bees. She saw me watching and she said, aren't they wonderful? They're so friendly. It's kind of like having pets you don't need to feed. Who thinks like this? You know? And she's just a constant source of wonderment for me. She rides horses. She paints. She's 79. She paints like a fiend. And she's always joyful now. I'll see her and she'll have a piece of rock and she's just looking at the way that the light reflects on it. And she's a hoarder, which I didn't realize when I was growing up because our houses were always burning down. But, she's happy. She's a happy woman.
Was there a journey to forgiveness there?
If she would have died 15 years ago, I don't think I would have cried.
Really?
I don't think I was angry, but I was anesthetized. It was just sort of, she has nothing to do with me and I have nothing to do with her.
It's an interesting way of putting it.
Even though I talked to her on a regular basis, I was just very, her life is her life and my life is my life, and we're separate and we have nothing to do with each other. I think only once I was able to sort of come to terms with my past could I appreciate the gifts she gave me. And I do believe she's the most optimistic human being in the world. I believe she gave me the gift of optimism, the gift of self-determination. The line about the cheerleaders also came when I wanted to become a cheerleader. I was so jealous of all the cheerleaders, and they were cute with their little flouncy skirts, and I was all knees and buck teeth, and there's just no way I could have been a cheerleader. And she said, "You don't want to be a cheerleader anyway." And that line, it was when I was around 12 years old. And I've always remembered that line because I thought it was really wise. And only by revisiting my own past did I learn some of the lessons I should have learned a long time ago. I always remember that line, but there were a lot of other things. The memoir writing process, if any of you are considered doing it, I cannot recommend it strongly enough, even if you don't want to get published. We all know things we don't realize we know. The first time I read my own book back, I was a little shocked.
There's power in putting pen to paper.
There's such power.
Yeah.
And seeing the words and asking yourself, am I being honest here? And what really happened? And it's very powerful therapy. And I don't even think I forgave my mom as much as accepted, because forgiveness, it would be setting myself up as a victim, and I don't see it that way.
Were you angry?
No. Disappointed, or disgusted maybe. Disgusted and just dismissive. And when I was interviewing for Half Broke Horses, she was going on about the Havasupai Indians and the Yavapai Indians and the Yavapai Indians and what the words mean and when the language split off in the year 800. How does she know all this stuff? She didn't know my birthday. How did she know all this? She must be making this up, but I Googled it and she was dead on with everything. I went back to her, "Ma, how do you know all this stuff and you don't know my birthday?" She said, "I don't find your birthday particularly interesting."
Well, that was honest.
She doesn't know her Social Security number, but she can tell you the layers of rock in the Grand Canyon from the very bottom, the year that it was all. If it fascinates her, she'll never forget it. She thinks differently than most people. I wasn't angry as much as I was frustrated, and I didn't think people would understand. And there was this weird combination of love and pride and shame and just everything mushed together. And I did not think that I could have a normal life because of her. And in a way I didn't. I had a better than normal life. I've had an incredibly wonderful life once I could come to terms with my past.
How did you do that, though? Because I'm thinking, as a little girl, all a little girl really wants is to be the center of her mom's world. It would be crushing for, a mother to say to a little girl, your birthday doesn't matter, because that means you don't matter.
I had my birthday wrong for most of my life. I finally set off for my birth certificate when I came to New York City, and we had it on the wrong date. So, and Mom said, "I must have forgotten it." But I was never the center of my mother's life. And I hope this doesn't sound bitter, but I wasn't. I never was. I never really meant that much to her. And it's just something I accepted way early on. My father, that's another story. My father just made me feel like the most wonderful thing in the world. And that's why and I know the man was flawed, I know he was an alcoholic, I adored him. And sometimes I fantasize to this day, if he were still alive, maybe I could get him to stop drinking. Wouldn't happen. But I believe he also gave me incredible gifts. The gift of dreaming, belief that maybe one of these days I would have a nice castle to live in, a glass castle. So, if a parent gives a kid self-esteem and a belief in themselves and the tools to realize their dreams, I think that's the greatest gift they can give them.
Your siblings feel the same way?
No.
They don't, do they? No, you're one special lady. No, they don't. No, that was a quick no.
Well, it's so funny, in sitting down, mom, when I asked mom, what do I tell people when they ask me about you? She said, tell them the truth. That's simple enough. But the truth is not so simple. And sitting down and trying to tell the truth, anybody with siblings knows. You sit down and talk about your childhood, we all have our own truths. And the facts can be exactly the same, and the truth you go away with is entirely different. So, there were certain things about my childhood that I genuinely loved. Some things I didn't necessarily love, but I wouldn't trade it in for anything. I wouldn't. I think that I have a great life now. I live in a house with 4 flush toilets. Life is good. Anybody, and I bet you there's a few in here who grew up without indoor plumbing, and you know what a miracle a toilet is. It's like, you just move the little handle, the stuff disappears. And I can go to a grocery store and buy anything I want. And that's a miracle to me, too. I don't have to stop at $3. I don't have to ask the grocer if he has any old food he's going to throw away. This is a miracle to me.
And it's interesting because you refer to them as food issues,
Yeah,
but that
yeah.
kind of permeates this as well.
Yes.
When these girls have to live on chicken pot pies because their mother takes off and they don't know when she's coming back, and so it's chicken pot pies for supper every night.
Yeah, and again, from your own experience. And I have a different relationship with food than most people do. And it's funny to me when my friends say that they eat when they get anxious or upset, because I have the opposite. I do not turn to food for comfort. I don't have that association. Mealtime and having a mother who gives you food, it's just not part of my Pavlovian response. I don't have an association that links nurturing and food. Food is fuel. That's sort of all it is for me.
What does family mean to you?
It's wow. That's a big question. That's a big question, and what it should mean and sometimes does mean, because when somebody abdicates their role as a protector, then you have to take whatever role they give you. But somebody who's willing to stick by you, whether they're related to you or not. When Uncle Tinsley sort of stuck by, and Bean discovered her cousins, and they sort of became a surrogate family. So sometimes family's where you'll find it.
It sure is. Do you think that you could write about a family that doesn't have dysfunction in it?
Oh, no. No,
it wouldn't be that,
it wouldn't be that interesting. No, you write what you. I'm never going to write about thrillers. I'm never going to do whodunits or whatever. And this is what fascinates me. What motivates people? What people's fears? People trying to struggle through tough times. And it's the sort of books I gravitate towards as well.
This story I could see on the big screen. I could. As I was reading it, I was seeing it, if that makes sense.
It would be easier to turn this into a movie than The Glass Castle.
Yes, it would be.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be. Is that something that would make you happy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm shameless, of course.
There are some authors who say, well, they wouldn't handle the material correctly, and I want to
more the merrier, I mean, the thing is that, unless they completely botch it, but the thing is, whenever a book gets made into a movie, more people read the book, and so as far as I'm concerned, if it brings a wider audience, that's all good. It's all good.
I want to get back to the family discussion and why you don't have kids.
None of us girls have kids, and my brother does. Why do you think that is, huh? I remember very vividly being 13 years old, and I took over the mom role for the summer. And I very vividly remember looking around thinking, this is really hard. This is hard. I thought I could be a better mom than my mother. I thought I could pay the bills and get my dad to stop drinking. And I didn't. And I was giving Dad drinking money. And I remember looking at my mom when she came back. She was 38, I was 13. And I was thinking, she's not old, but she's not young either. And I don't want to be 38 years old and living in an unheated shack with 4 hungry kids. and I'm going to get my ducks in a row before I have children. And you know something? The ducks never get in a row. I always thought I'd have kids. I love kids, but I never had that drive. They say that there's something called parented children. It's a syndrome. And if you take on a bunch of adult responsibilities as a child, you're less inclined to want to do it it's not that I don't love children, it's sort of more, been there, done that. And my husband has a daughter from a previous marriage. My brother has children, and I'm very close to all of my husband's nieces and nephews. And they all love Aunt Jeanette, who will go out and dig in the compost pile for worms. And so I have no regrets. I have no regrets about not having children. I do wonder what kind of mom I would have been if I would have, the school of, hard knocks. I went without food, or whether I would have overindulged them, And I think all parents wrestle with that. And it's a tough thing to know when people have so much today, and they got iPods and they got iPhones and how do you teach children to appreciate what they have? And I think it's a matter of exposure. This is not a plug for my book, but the number of and I say this derisively, but I don't mean it, of rich kids who've read my story and then gone to their parents and said, Mom, I have no idea. And it just opens up their eyes and opens up their minds. And whether you do it through that or take them to work in soup kitchens, kids are very impressionable and very empathetic. And if you get them before they really start passing judgments and just open your eyes, they're really good at figuring out, I'm kind of lucky. And I talked to one young woman who, after having read my book, canceled her coming out party and opened up a homeless shelter for teens with it.
Really?
Yeah. And again, if I got struck down by lightning now, I'd say, that's fine with me.
You've changed lives.
And
you never thought you would.
I never thought
you were
I would.
just trying to change your own.
I was just trying to come to terms with my own past.
You were trying to get your own ducks in a row.
And exactly, and that's the lesson I've learned. That these things that we have that we don't like about, if you're able to share that, not only does it help you, it helps other people. And it's such a life changer.
What has been the best part of fame?
Oh, I'm not, I don't know.
And I knew you were going to say that. You're going to say, I'm not famous. You are.
No.
Yeah, you are. What's been what's the best part of having so many people having read your books?
That I have I feel that I have so many new friends that I haven't met them all. Sometimes they write me letters, sometimes they come to events like this. The barriers are down. There's no pretense, there's no holding back. They'll tell me stories about themselves. They feel that they know me. It blows me away. I wake up every day, I pinch myself. I can't believe my fortune. But it's not about me, it's about the goodness of people that I did not expect. And, if you project fear and anger and distrust, that's what you're going to get back. But if you start projecting openness and then, oh my gosh, people, and I get these letters from kids in school. My dad's a drunk and we drive a beaten up car, and the other kids at school make fun of me, but after having read your story, I thought if she made it, I can too. It doesn't get any better than that.
No, it doesn't. Conversely, is there a challenging part of all of this?
I wish I could respond to all the letters I get with the time and compassion that I should. People pour their hearts out to me, and I've got a big old stack, and I try to write everybody, but I'm way behind. And you just sort of say, thank you, I appreciate it, and but I'm so far behind. And if anybody's written me a letter, I'll get to it. I will get to it, but that is such a, I feel I can't give back as much as I'm getting.
It's amazing that you even take the time to write.
Oh, God.
And you don't have people doing it.
Well,
right?
If you saw these letters, there's no way you couldn't respond. There's just, the kids, and it was funny when The Glass Castle was very first published. The very first interview I did, Diane Rehm on NPR, and the very first call was somebody saying, fascinating story, I don't believe a word of it.
Really?
And I was like, because it was so weird, because my husband had to pull the story out of me in the first place, and it never occurred to me that somebody wouldn't believe it, because it was embarrassing. Why would I say all these embarrassing things about myself? And, the gentleman, I'm sure he was a nice guy, but he might want to get out of the gated community from time to time, because some people say, I refuse to believe that poverty existed like that in America in the 1970s.
And still does. And still does.
And still does. And so if I can open up people's eyes to other people's situations like that, and if I can open people's eyes to their own situation, and if by talking about this and going to events such as this, keep the dialogue going.
And that's what it's about, because that's what it's about. And it's really, it's the ignorance, isn't it?
It's the ignorance. It's ignorance, and not
ignorance.
Cruelty, not viciousness.
It's just not knowing.
Not knowing.
It's not knowing.
And that is why the truth is so important and so valuable.
The truth will set you free?
It will.
Is there anything at this point that you still desperately want that you don't have?
Oh.
Is there a laundry list?
Oh, the laundry list was filled a long time ago. There's.
You're good.
I think there's a Hebrew word, dainu, I think is, and it means this is enough. This is enough. If I got nothing more in life, nothing. I mean, and I reached that point a long time ago. This is so much more than I would have ever. I mean, I used to dream and pray and wish for a bathroom. That was one of my fondest hopes. Is that, so, and people ask me, why aren't you bitter, why aren't you angry? I got 3 bathrooms now, I can do anything I want. I mean, life is so wonderful. And I think that sometimes people, I certainly know in America that we forget how much we have. We take it for granted. And that's one of, I will never take anything for granted. Never, never. Oscar Wilde once said, a necessity is a luxury once sampled. And I'm afraid there's some truth to that, because once you got the iPhone, I could never live without this thing. I could never survive without it.
But then it's about wanting more.
Wanting more.
We're insatiable. We never have enough.
And I think that the great thing about not having anything is you know how little you need. You know how tough you are, that you can survive just about anything. Life is a lot sweeter when you have the luxuries, but they are luxuries.
What can't you live without?
My husband.
That's very sweet.
I got a keeper. He's a good one.
He's got a good one, too.
Thank you.
He does. He's got a good one, too. Tina, are you wrapping us? Yeah. Oh, questions. Okay. We'll take questions now, but you're wrapping this, because I could talk all night. Okay.
We're going to go afterwards and talk all night.
Exactly. So I'm sure, you've been lovely, by the way, just amazing. I have to share with you. Amazing.
Thank you.
I have to share with you that before we came out, Jeanette said, and Marci, just to let you know, ask anything you want. And I said, you don't understand. I said, Jeanette, I do a morning show, and I can't tell you how many guests we have that come in with their people with a list this long of things we're not supposed to ask. And how many times I've said to them, or Bev said to them, then why are you here? Really? You're here to be interviewed. Let us interview you. But Jeanette said, anything you want.
Anything.
No boundaries whatsoever. And I so appreciate that.
Thank you.
So appreciate that. So, questions, folks? Please, the microphone is right there. Don't be shy. It is hard for the first person.
For the short people. It struck me when you were talking about kids and entitlement and so on. I am the parent of 3. Are you asked, or do you go out of your way to take opportunity to speak to young audiences about your experience and draw some of those pictures for them?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I do a lot of speaking at high schools and universities. In fact, I'm going to be speaking later at King's College, I think it is, and it's often the Glass Castle is often a common read in communities, in colleges and high schools, and I get very spirited conversations. It's fascinating, and the kids are really, really smart about it, and I think it can open up an astonishing dialogue. Again, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm bragging about this sort of thing, but very often these kids, they're all getting together for the first time, and it enables them to discuss sensitive issues without invading their own privacy. And I've had so many teachers tell me that usually getting kids to discuss a book is like pulling teeth. They don't want to stop talking about this. The number of high school students and college students who've told me that The Glass Castle is the first book they've ever read cover to cover is a little astonishing to me. And then they'll say it's also the only, or I also hear people say it's the only book they've ever enjoyed, and then they often follow that up with, and it's made me realize that maybe I do enjoy reading. I just need to find books that were written for people like me. And not to knock the classics, I think that classics are great for AP, but with kids who are not necessarily inclined to care about what happened to Hester Prynne in her Scarlet Letter, yep. I just think that, if you want to reach these kids who consider education a poisonous word, reading, I tell these kids, reading is great. It's like reality television. It's storytelling. That's all it is. And somehow a lot of kids out there think it's things that only nerds do. So I have wonderful conversations with kids about reading, but also about the issues of independence, self-sufficiency, being nicer to the poor kids having maybe a little bit more self-esteem and think that you're not so different from the rich kids. The circumstances are just different. A teacher told me that she was having her kids read The Glass Castle because it's an impoverished area, and Dickens just wasn't getting through to them. And she said there was a girl, she said there was one girl in particular she was trying to get through to. She said she's a good girl, but she's had a few brushes with the law. And this girl slams my book down on her desk, and she said, that's a very upsetting book to me. And the teacher said, why? And she said, there's a scene where the mother takes 3 kids to go shoplifting. That is wrong. And the teacher said, well, this is great. I can have a conversation about shoplifting and crime and punishment. She said, what bothered you about that scene? And this young woman says, when you go shoplifting for one of the kids, you got to get something for all of them.
Thank you.
It was quite the eye-opening conversation. She said, I'd always thought of this person as somebody who doesn't follow rules, but I understood after that. It's not she doesn't follow rules, she was taught a different set of rules.
Yeah.
So that's why we read. That's why we share stories.
Great question.
Next year, I'm writing my 8th grade speech. Could you please tell me one thing that you want to say to the people I'm speaking to?
I'm sorry, what speech?
Sorry. My 8th grade speech.
I would say write about something that means a great deal to you. Write about something you care about. Don't try to fake it. Write about something that you think about a lot, and write from the heart. Write about something that is revealing and personal, and that you think will help people understand you better. It doesn't have to be too revealing, but it can be something that people don't know, that you can tell something. You know something that other people don't know, and if you can put that into words, and now this is also important, don't be afraid to rewrite. Good writing is rewriting. Write it, set it aside, write it again, read it out loud. Write in your own voice. Don't be using big words that a little word would do better. Get across your message, get it across powerfully, and figure out what is it that you're trying to say. What is it you're trying to convince the reader of? And good luck on it.
Jeanette, thanks for writing your books. They're amazing, and they touch on so many intimate experiences, so many personal experiences in your life. And go back so far, your memories stretch to like an early age, and so many kind of really difficult and traumatic experiences. And I'm wondering how it is that you're able to remember all of this stuff. Is it shared experiences with your siblings and stories as you grow up that help you to remember things? And I say this because I grew up in a family of 4. Difficult times, and sometimes that I think I repress, because when I talk to my siblings, I remember things I don't quite remember. And so I was just wondering if there's an element of that in some of your writing, just sharing experiences and remembering through what they remember. And I guess the other thing you talked about is you all come away with kind of a different perception as siblings of your childhood. So I just wondered about if you could talk about that.
Well, all of my siblings have read The Glass Castle, and nobody disputes a single fact in it, but they all have a different perception. My very favorite memory from my entire life is getting a star when we had no money to buy Christmas presents, and I wanted a planet. Dad said, "What the hell, it's Christmas, you want a planet, you got a planet," and he gave me Venus. And it's my most treasured memory ever. And I told that story at my father's funeral, and my sister Lori folds her arms and says, "Isn't that like that sorry SOB dad of ours to go give away something that doesn't belong to him in the first place?" and so my fondest memory is one of her most bitter. And so it's fascinating, the difference in perceptions. But so far as memory, I used to think we all know much more than we realize, and if you sit down and just pull at it, that it all comes out. Brain scientists will tell you that traumatic memories are stored in a certain part of the brain. That's why so many people remember exactly what they were doing when Kennedy was shot, because it stays there. In layman's terms, it plays in a loop in your head. So there are a couple of those things that not only it wouldn't have been hard to remember them. What was hard is trying to forget them. And so it was my husband who suggested that I open up with the burn scene, and I said, that's no big deal. I didn't die from it or anything. He said, "It was a big deal, Jeanette, trust me." He said, "That scene is going to depend on detail. Put all the detail you can remember in." "Oh, okay," so Ron typed it out, and he looked at it, and he said, "You can take some of this detail out, Jeanette." And some people say, "How could you possibly remember something that happened from when you were 3? I bet you if we did a show of hands, how many people here remember something from when they were 3? So, and I'll bet you that with many of you, it's a traumatic memory. Yeah. So these memories, they sort of lodge in your head. And I very vividly, I remember the heat on this side of it was mostly on this side. I remember the flames licking up. I remember the smell. So I opened with that. And then I just wrote down the most vivid scenes that I could remember. More challenging than the details from the scenes was what happened sort of in between, but moreover, putting them in order. Did this happen in Battle Mountain? So there were certain things. Now, I didn't keep journals. I didn't interview anybody, and I didn't, including my siblings. I relied on my memory. That being said, I'm sure that there must have been some things I got wrong, but you get as close as you can. You get as close as you can to the truth. And I was really gladdened that when I showed it to my brother after I wrote it, there were a couple of things he said, "I didn't think you realized what was going on at that point," or "I can't believe you remember that." But our memories were very, very similar. So people have asked me, how much can you make up as a memoirist? I think you don't make anything up. The soft cover, the paperback of The Glass Castle came out around the whole time of the James Fry controversy. So a lot of people, "Oh, you make things up." No, you don't. No. I remember the cheetah that licked my hand as being gorgeous and noble. Brian said it was a mangy, flea-bitten critter, but it was a cheetah, wasn't a barracuda. So, you have your perceptions, but once you start making things up, that's a slippery slope, even if it's just composite characters or whatever, because people turn to you for the truth. How did you survive poverty? How did you survive the Holocaust? How did you break your drug addiction? Once you start lying to other people, you're lying to yourself, first of all. But once you start lying to other people, you betray that trust. So if you're looking to write a memoir and you're forgetting something, you can't get something right, do the best you can. Do the best you can. You might want to interview other people, but it's as getting as close to the truth as possible. And it's impossible to get to the absolute truth. As a former journalist, and I'm sure you would back me up on this, getting at the truth is almost impossible. There's so many different versions, and you can be interviewing something about something that happened yesterday, and you're going to get different versions. And it's all about getting as close to what really happened as you can.
It's about your truth. Yeah, it's about what you lived. Right.
It's about what you lived. That being said, the people who say this is my truth, because there was this woman who wrote a memoir about being in a gang in South LA and being raised, that she was half Native American, and she was raised by a black woman in South LA. Turns out she was a Valley girl who went to a fancy private school. And she said, "Well, I feel that this is my truth." No. That's called fiction, okay? And that's emotional truth. But it is your perceptions, and try to honor and some empathy as well, other people's truths as well. I think you shouldn't go around trying to vilify or get revenge or whatever, but as close as you can to the truth.
Thank you.
I love The Glass Castle, and it's been a few years since I've read it, and I'm looking forward to rereading it again, starting in the next few days. I agree with you that I think that often character building experiences come from a difficult childhood. If you've had a difficult childhood, it's obviously character building. What distinguished you from your siblings and other people who have a difficult childhood in allowing you to rise to the top when others stumble and don't accomplish anything?
I give my father credit. I think that if you have one person in your life who thinks you're great, that you can make it through just about anything, and that's why I call the book The Glass Castle, because no matter how tough times got, Dad always gave me that hope and dream for the future and the belief that I was destined for something better than sleeping in cars and sleeping in cardboard boxes. He gave me that vision of my future. And if you don't get that, if a child doesn't get that from anybody, it's really hard for them to find that light in themselves. If there's somebody, ideally it's a parent, sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's a clergyman, sometimes it's a relative, sometimes it's a neighbor. If there's one person who's a constant or even regular force in that child's life, who says, it'll be okay, you are good and you're strong, and you will amount to something, I believe you can make it through just about anything. I really do. And my brother, he, after he retired from the police force, he went into school teaching. He said, becoming a parent made him less sympathetic to mom and dad. He said, it's not that hard to feed your kids. But becoming a school teacher made him appreciate mom and dad more. He taught in a rough area in Brooklyn. He said what some of these kids were not given by their parents was staggering to him. We grew up reading. We grew up spending a lot of time with them. And some of these kids, their parents told them that they didn't want them. That's tough. That's really hard. And I don't care whether you're rich or poor. You hear that sort of stuff, that's hard to get past. Thank you.
Hello. I love The Glass Castle. It's been my favorite book since I read it. Recommend it to everyone. They all always love it. I would just like to know what your favorite book is.
It's something I read when I was 10 years old. It was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn.
I love that book too.
I was homely and unpopular, pretty much friendless. I loved books, and I thought if this homely, friendless, book-loving kid can love her drunk, no-count daddy and get out of the situation that she's in, maybe I can too.
Great book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought she was better than that. I was giving her time to get there. Two back? Okay. What's next?
That was really funny.
Oh, do we have a question? Okay, this will be the final question, Jeanette.
Hi, Jeanette. It's actually not a question, it's a thank you. I have my husband, he doesn't read. And we were in Mexico this year, and I brought a book along that I had forgotten about, and it's Half Broke Horses. I had read The Glass Castle's wonderful, and I thought, gotta get to this one. So I started reading it, and I loved it, but I had no one to share it with. So I read it out loud on the beach, 2 lounge chairs, and he loved it. He just loved it, so I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
And he's waiting for me to read The Glass Castles.
Thank you.
Hi, my wife passed your book on, and I very much enjoyed it. I think I'm the minority of the demographic in the room, but I really enjoyed it. And my question comes from my wife, and she was wondering if you were thinking of writing a parenting handbook, because she realized, and we were thinking a lot about helicopter parenting in this day and age, and she realized what kids can endure by reading The Glass Castle, and how much we're really involved in our kids' lives and probably don't need to be. And wondering sort of your thoughts on that and helicopter parenting, and are you going to write us all a parenting handbook? Thank you.
Gosh, I would not write it. I'm not a parent. I wouldn't dare to tell people how to raise children. I mean, it's so much on a case-by-case basis. And I do believe that if you love them, they can get through just about anything. I do believe that if you overprotect them, they will not learn how strong they are. If you pick them up every time that they fall, they're not going to learn how to pick themselves up. But I would never dare to tell anybody how to raise his or her child. I will tell you that a number of people have given their children my book, and that they have these amazing conversations about resilience, self-sufficiency, poverty, what a parent is entitled to do for a child and what a child is entitled to do for the parent. And usually afterwards, the child hugs the mom and said, "Thank you for feeding me," so so I'm a hero in some households. The parents, and a lot of people tell me, "I thought I had the worst mother in the world. I'm so happy to meet you." So I appreciate the compliment that you think I'm up to it. But whatever I have to say about parenting, I've sort of already said, in terms of, don't do this at home, folks. But in terms of just my own story and what you could learn from it, to do or not to do. And my experience has been that people have just been really wise about pulling lessons out of it. I've been at events where people get into debates about whether or not I had good parents. And at one event, pretty much everybody in the room thought that I'd been abused and neglected. And the person who was most voraciously defending my parents had been born and raised on Fifth Avenue. And she said, if my father had one time discussed the stars with me, or if my mother had one time said, "Don't worry what other people think of you, be yourself," I wouldn't be in therapy today. So I don't have the answers. But the fact that I've raised the questions is more than I could have ever hoped for. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your thoughtful questions, and thank you for the truth. It's your pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.